All right, hi everyone. Today I'm going to go over some tips that you can use in Microsoft Word. I'm just going to open up a document here and we will get started. What we're going to go over today are things that are useful that I have learned the hard way in Microsoft Word. So I'm hoping to share my wisdom with you so that you can learn from my own mistakes. We're going to go over page breaks, table of contents, as well as tips for formatting tables. So we're going to start by talking about page breaks. And if you're wondering what a page break does, essentially it breaks your document up so that pages remain formatted the same way throughout changes to your document and throughout adding different information. Where I find page breaks to be the most helpful is definitely for references. So to give you an example, I'm going to scroll down here with this document that does not look nice now, but it will get there. And let's say you're working on a document and you have all your references right here. But we know that our references should be on their own page. So typically what I find is really easy to do, or what a lot of people might do, is you might just go enter, 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 continuing to hold down your enter button until your references get to the last page. And you're like, okay, perfect, it looks good. They're in the right spot. All right. But the problem with that is maybe you send a draft out to Kim and she gives you feedback and you need to add in more information. Maybe, for instance, maybe we want to add a note under our table here. So we can, type note, and maybe you need to explain each thing in your table, and you end up with a few lines here. And then maybe let's, for example, say you forgot a conclusion, you have to add in a whole nother paragraph. And then you scroll down and your references are no longer at the top of the page, they're in the middle. What you could do is you could go and, either erase the content, which you wouldn't want to do, or you can keep hitting enter until your references get to the bottom. And I'm going to suggest to you now to never do that ever again. One, it is tedious, it'll take up your time. Typically, when you're reading through your document, you get towards the end, you don't want to look at your references, maybe you forget, and then you'll have to go revisit that later. But how to avoid that is by instead using a page break. So we're going to get rid of all of our enters, bringing our references back up here. Okay, so maybe we've added a little bit more content. Perfect, we've made any changes we need. We can now add a page break. And the easiest way to insert a page break, I find, is you want to put your cursor before any content that you want on its own page. In this case, we want our references on their own page. We're going to put the cursor before the R in references. And we have a couple of options here. We can either go to layout and put in a page break by coming over to our break option here, and we're going to hit page break. And what that does is make sure that no matter what, our references will always be on the last page. And sometimes when we use page breaks, it can be a little bit difficult to know exactly where they are in our document, which is why I want to draw your attention to when we go to our home screen here. If I look right now, you can see all these little blue, like backwards P's almost on my screen. That is because this option here, the show and hide, I think it's called paragraph function, is turned on, which means I can tell exactly where my page break is. And by showing this page break, I know that anything I type before this page break will stay where it is. Anything after the page break will become a part of that new page. So we would be adding it to the references there. But if we turn that function off, it's really hard to know where our page break is. So I just want to bring your attention to this tool here. You can easily figure out what's going on. If you need to delete it, you can highlight the page break and delete it. Gets rid of it, you know exactly where it is. If If you want to add it back, another way you can add a page break is by using a shortcut on a Mac computer. I know it is Command Return. So I hit Command Return here. I get a page break. On a PC, I believe it is just Control Enter. So there's a few different ways you can use page break. I prefer the shortcut of Command Enter. That is the first thing that I wanted to show you. I really suggest that you use it. It will make sure formatting stays consistent when you go back and forth in documents, and especially if you're going between different versions of Word. Word recognizes that page break, and it'll make sure it shows up the same for everybody. That is the first piece of advice I have for you. Getting away from our page breaks, we're next going to go into our creating a table of contents. Table of contents can be useful. I know they're required in a few documents, which is why I want to go over them. To make a table of contents, we're going to utilize this labeling function here within our home document screen in Word. So looking up here at these different boxes, we can label our text, which you will see comes in very handy. But first, we know that our table of contents needs to come before this tips and tricks, and we know it. We always are going to want it on its own page. So we can go ahead and enter a page break. And now anything we type before will always be on a separate page than our main body here. So here's where we can enter our table of contents. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go through and I'm going to have to type introduction. And maybe you're like, now I need dots leading up to this. I'm going to put a bunch of periods and it's page 1. If you do that, you will go crazy. And luckily, technology has come a long way, and we do not ever need to do that if we use these labeling tools up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down our document, and we're going to label our headings. You can use the headings outlined by APA, but for this example, I'm just going to kind of go through more generally. Starting off with our title, we're going to label our title heading 1. When we label it, Word automatically reformats it. But if we go up to heading 1, we can right click and we can edit its default formatting. We go to modify, and we're going to we can label this heading 1 APA. We can change the font. We can change the font size. We can make it bolded. We can make sure it's automatic opposed to blue. And we can make sure all of our heading 1s will be in the middle of our document or in that format. We hit OK. Going through my document, maybe you want to label these other subheadings below heading 1, which means we're going to use heading number 2. So if we highlight what you will learn as one of our headings, we're going to go heading 2. And again, we'll have to go in and modify the formatting, right-clicking on heading 2, hitting modify. Again, you can relabel it if you like, and you're just going to go through and adjust as needed for the document you're working on. Again, making sure it is APA if you need your document in APA. You can keep it to the left here. We're going to hit OK. And now, if we go through our document, we can label anything we want to show up in our table of contents. So I can label another heading 2, and now the formatting's good. Again, going through, making sure to go through your document, label anything you want in that table of contents. References, we can make heading 1. Oops. Yeah, we're good. All right, so now that we've labeled everything we want to, we're going to go up, click before our page break, and we're going to go to the References tab. From here, we're going to go to the very left to our table of contents. Lots of options here. I'm going to hit Classic. And here we go. We have a table of contents. It's clickable, which is really handy. So if I want to go down to my references on page 4, I click it. There they are. And maybe you make your table of contents and then you get a few last-minute edits from your committee. And maybe you enter more information at some point. Maybe you add a conclusion paragraph, maybe you had to add something in, maybe you add acknowledgements at the beginning. For whatever reason, your references end up on page 5 now. But when we go back up to our table of contents, they are still showing up as page number 4, which means we need to update our table. And so you have two options here. You can either click on the left top hand corner of your table, click the drop down arrow and go update table, or you can go back up to the references tab and click update table. Doesn't matter, whatever you prefer. And you have the option to either update the page numbers only, or you can update your entire table. Where you'd want to update your entire table is maybe if your heading changes, or maybe you change the spelling of any of those headings. You're going to hit update. We can do update page numbers only. We'll hit OK. And now you can see our references show up on the right page, which is page number 5. And everything lines up, which is great. And then that is pretty much it for the table of contents. Again, will save you a lot of time. I found a few times my Mac version of Word can be a little bit finicky, and I've had to go and just finalize it on a PC computer, but hopefully the glitches are out by now. And we're also going to go down here to our table. So I want to bring you to a few things you can do within the table format here in Word. First of all, this table right now is formatted in APA, but typically when we make our table, it probably looks more like this. The first issue we want to address is that our table is way larger than our window of our document. We're going to click the left-hand side of this table here, making sure, oops, it's all highlighted, and now it even got more messed up, so I'm like, what the heck? We're going to go to table layout, and we're going to find the auto fit function. We're going to click it, and if we want everything in our table to make sure it's viewable, we're going to hit auto fit window. You could also use auto fit contents if you want everything to be spaced out equally. But for now, we're just going to do auto fit window. And again, that got shifted over somehow. So I'm just going to drag it back. OK, we're good. And now our table is all within view. And then maybe here we notice, OK, but like my table on 2 pages, here's another opportunity. We can use a page break, make sure that it's all together. So coming back to our table right now, it is not in APA format. You'll probably notice with APA, there's no lines in between rows. And you might be tempted to go, oh, okay, so I'm going to take all my measures and I'm going to put all of them in one box. That way that there won't be any lines. That becomes really frustrating when you have to go through making sure everything lines up. Things can get really messy really quick. Things can look wrong or not right between edits and different Microsoft Word versions. So we're going to avoid that at all costs. And we are going to keep our table just as it is. And in order to get it into APA format, we're going to use the border function, which is next to the paint can up here. It looks like a window. First, we're going to highlight our table. And first, what we want to do is take off all of our borders, which means our table has no lines. But now it's really hard to look at, really hard to understand where things are. You can turn on view grid lines, and these are just giving you guidance as to where everything is. And then in order to format an APA, it's the best and easiest way I find is so you're going to highlight your table, and sorry, not your table, but we're going to come back to using our border function. So we know that for this whole row here, we wanted to have a line on top. We're going to go to the border, and we're going to hit top border. And then we also know, okay, I want a line across the bottom. We can highlight everything in that row. And we can hit bottom border. And then with APA, there's a lot of distinct formatting. which can be a little bit tricky to navigate at times. But let's say, for example, you want a line below this entire row. You can hit bottom border, but maybe on the top row, you only want it going just after, in our case here, the appearance condition. We're going to highlight only those 4 boxes, and we're going to add a bottom border. And it's looking pretty good, and we might also want a border below all of these. I think it looks pretty good. We're going to take off our grid lines, and we got a pretty nice looking APA table here, and our formatting will stay consistent. That is really all I have to offer in terms of table formatting. The other thing you could consider, if we turn our grid lines back on here for a minute, you might want to make sure everything is equal in size. So maybe you have, these 4 groups here. You want to make sure they all line up and they're all the same size. We can go back to layout, auto fit. We're going to go fixed column width, which will make sure all of those have the same size column. So for example, if I made this one smaller, I can highlight all of these and fixed column width. I think it's because I didn't highlight all of them. Let's try that again. Never mind, we'll come back to that. It's an example of sometimes Word works great, sometimes that is not always the best. However, we're going to move on to our references. Coming back down to the bottom here, you might notice, okay, these look pretty good, but there's something not right. They're not quite APA format. You might be tempted, okay, how do I get this bottom line shifted over towards the right? You might be tempted to just add in a bunch of spaces, which on my computer doesn't like to do that. So maybe you get really desperate and maybe you type in some random letters and maybe you make them white. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty good. No, there's a way easier way to do that. That'll make sure everything stays good. You don't have any extra spaces. We're going to highlight our references here. We're going to right click and we're going to come down to paragraphs. At our paragraph, we're going to go to indentation and we're just going to click hanging indentation. Okay, everything seems good. We're going to hit OK. And our references now are proper APA format. That is really all I have to offer for today, so thank you. And if you have any questions, let me know.